Hello everybody. In this video lecture, we will cover population ecology. And to help me to cover this topic, I'm gonna use PowerPoint slide. So this is a PowerPoint that I am using today. Okay, so let's go ahead and begin. So ecology is the scientific study of the interactions between organisms and their environment. So you immediately can see that it's very, let me get my pointer, dynamic branch of biology, right? So dynamic means we not only study different populations or different communities, we study them when they interacting with each other and with the environment. Also, we have 5 levels of organizations that can be studied by ecologists. So we can study individual organisms, we can study populations, communities, ecosystems, and the whole biome. And if you go from bottom up, right, those groups are getting larger and larger. So here, ecology can be divided into 4 increasingly comprehensive levels: organismal ecology, population ecology, community ecology, ecosystem ecology. And in this chapter, we are covering this, population ecology. So here's our definition for ecology that we already mentioned. So what is population? If you study population, we want to know what population is. So, sorry for that. I had to turn off my TV because otherwise I have some, bad recording. So population. Population are all the members of the same species that inhabit a particular area. Now, community are all the populations found in a particular area. So populations are same species, community, all the population in a particular area. Ecosystem are community, and it's all physical environment, including non-living part of the environment, and we call it abiotic factors, and living a component of the environment that we call biotic factors. And it will be another lecture on the community and ecosystem ecology. Biosphere are all the communities on Earth whose members exist in air, water, and land. So how can we study populations? Well, what can characterize population? We can, populations are characterized by their size and density, right? So we can study population size, and that means total number of individuals, and population density, that number of individuals per unit area, right? So if you look at this example over here, so it might be, our population, and we can estimate the size, how many individuals are there. And we also can divide this number of individuals by the area, and we get density. So how to estimate size of a population? Obviously, if we want to see how many oak trees are growing on, some areas that is couple hundred, acres, we cannot just really go and start counting every single plant, right? Or over here, if you see this like grassy stuff here on this picture, we cannot just go ahead and count every single one. So we need to use some method that allow us not to count every individual organism, but estimate their numbers, right? So we can use a quadrat method. That's the name. Quadrat method is used for immobile organisms, organisms that do not move much, right? Such as plants or very slow moving. And how it works, there is a square, right? So that's a square. Quadrant is a wood, plastic, or metal square that is randomly located on the ground and used to count the number of individuals that lie within its boundaries. So instead of counting how many plants grow in, let's say, 50 acres of land, we're just gonna count how many individuals found in this quadrant. And it's not that easy, you know, just count it. There is a formula as it still need to be applied, but that will allow us to estimate the total size of a population by knowing how many are located within this square. So that was the method, quadrant method for either non-moving or slowly moving organism. But if we want to count mobile organisms, such as mammals, right, maybe birds, then we can use a different technique, and it's called mark and recapture technique, right? What it means, you capture, let's say, some rodents, right, some small or any small animals, you capture them, you mark them, and then you release them back in their environment and come back after certain amount of time and recapture them again. And when you recapture them, then you're counting how many individuals were previously marked, right? And then there is a formula to use to estimate the size of the population, right? So, for example, if 80 field mice are captured, marked, and released into the forest, right? So first time we just captured 80 mice, we marked all of them, and we released them. And the second time we capture 100 mice, but out of this 100, 20 were previously marked, right? So that's what we need. We need the three numbers, and this is the formula: number marked first catch multiplied by total number of second catch, so 80 by 100, and divide by number of marked, previously marked for the second capture, right? So that's the formula, allows us to estimate that if we have this number, our population size is about 400 mice. Okay, so in addition to measure density, further information about the population can be obtained by looking at the distribution of the individuals without their range. And we use what is called species distribution pattern. So what are those distribution patterns? So species may have random, clumped, or uniform distribution. And when we study the distribution pattern, it allows us to understand better how those individuals interact with each other than just simple density measurement. So here would be the random distribution. This show us the clump distribution, and here's the uniform, right? And actually the clumped is the most common type of distribution for living organisms, because life tends to, you know, live in a kind of like tend to form the groups and live within its group. Then it's easy to find a mate, easy to reproduce, easy to protect, be protected from predators, and so on, right? So that's the most common for animals, at least, clumped. So population density and size of the population, what they describe? They describe a population at one particular point of time, right? So you go, you measure the size, you measure the density, you look at the distribution pattern, but that's only for that particular time when you do those measurements. But what if we want to study population in their dynamics? Then this is what demography is for. So demography is statistical study of population changes over time. So scientists look at the birth rates, death rate, life expectancies, and this information is recorded in a table, and this table is called a life table. So here's an example of life table for human population. And it's a population in US in 2006. So you can have an idea how those tables are done. So we have an age interval for individuals, then we have number of living in this interval and number of dying during this interval, and then we calculate a chance of surviving, right? So you can see for human, for us, the higher chances of survival are in the interval actually from 10 years to 20, right? 10 to 20. So we have chances like, you know, to die 0.9% when we're little, like some maybe are born with some diseases, some conditions that will, you know, affect our health in this period of time. But if we survive by age of 10, from 10 to 20, when your parents taking care of you, when they're driving you to school, back from school, right? That's a good chances to survive. And then we have also good health over here, right? And we keep our survival chances, you know, pretty high. Actually, it's not 0.9, it's a 99%, right? So if you're looking at percent, it will be 99% chance to survive, 99.6% chance to survive, 99%, right? And then it start declining, and right, so here in age 80 and 90, 38.6% chance to survive in this interval. Okay, so so you see that for our population, that right, for humans, we have good chances of survival at our early ages, and then when we get old, then our chances of survival obviously decline. But are all animals and plants the same way? No, they are not. So that's why when scientists look at this life table, they can represent this data by graph, and it's called survivorship curve, right? So survivorship curve is another tool used to compare the life histories of different populations. So we just graph the number of individuals that are born, and when time goes by, how many of them are dying. And we can divide these survivorship curves into type 1, type 2, and type 3 survivorship type, right? Or type and two type, sorry for this. So type 1, most individuals survive past the midpoint of the lifespan. Death comes late, and those are large mammals, humans in developed countries. Type 3 is opposite to type 1. Most individuals die very young, and those are small animals, invertebrates, fishes, and they put human in undeveloped countries. That I personally disagree with this, but that's how our book tells us. And type 2 is in between. It's a constant loss of population. So survivorship decreases at constant rate. This is unrelated to age. And those will be small mammals, songbirds. So let me go back now to this graph. So here you can see if time goes this way, where my pointer disappeared. Oh, I guess I cannot use pointer when I'm not in the presentation mode. But here time goes this way. Let's say type 1 survivorship curve, many survive, right? And then when we reach age of 80 and 90, then, you know, unfortunately we die. But if you look at, let's say, plants or very small bugs, for instance, like small animals, many of them are born, but very many of them will die. without even reaching reproductive age. And whoever survives, they live longer. Good example would be a tree. So think about one tree producing, I don't know, million seeds, right? So many seeds, and every seed is potential new organism, new tree. But how many of those seeds will ever, grow into trees? Not many. Like, so many of them would never grow and develop. But some who lucky enough, right, they will then live, hundreds of years. So that's type 3 survivorship curve. And small mammals and birds, right, that's type 2. So the death rate is constant and not related to their age that much. So that's what we covered. So let me pick up the pointer. So the life history traits, that what we just described right now, right? Type of survivorship, how many are born, how many dies. This is actually a result of evolution. And those traits, they represent compromise of the competing needs for time, energy, and nutrients. So, so when we look at those survivorship, curves, they represent actually what we call life history. Organisms can be divided into two groups based on their life history. Organisms with opportunistic life history, those that take immediate advantage of favorable conditions. And they typically exhibit a type 3 survivorship curve. And we call this species with opportunistic life history R-selected species. And R is reproductive capacity, or I like R for reproduction, how fast they can reproduce. That would affect their life, right? And number of, well, not their life, this would affect the size of their population, right? But R is actually growth rate. But growth rate is not the same as reproductive capacity. But, we will talk about it in a minute. So R selected species and R is growth rate. They adapted to unstable and unpredictable environment. And what would be example? Here, dandelions. They take advantage of favorable conditions, right? If it's sunny and enough water, they start reproducing. And they make so many seeds, right? And very, very few of them only survive, right? But they take advantage from their environment. Another type of species, we call them K, selected species. And K stands for carrying capacity, And those are organisms with equilibrial life history. Those are usually big animals. So they develop and reach sexual maturity slowly. They produce few well-cared, they produce few offspring and they care about their offspring. So typically large body, longer lived, and exhibit type 1 survivorship curve. So what affects size of a population of K-selected species is how many of them can live on particular area, right? That's a carrying capacity. How many of them the environment can support, right? So two types of the life histories: opportunistic life history, type 3 survivorship curve, and equilibrial life history, type 1 survivorship curve, and R-selected species and K-selected species. So people are K-selected species. So here we can compare R-selected and K-selected species. We know that maturation time here short, so they can reproduce very quickly. Here is long. a climate for opportunistic species unpredictable and must be predictable for equilibrial species, right? Death rate often high or usually low, right? So over here, so you can look at this picture in your PowerPoint. Here, parental care, very little or none, or very extensive. Okay, so so what we're talking about here, we're talking about a population ecology, and we said like, okay, how can we study population? We can measure its size, we can measure density, look at distribution patterns, or we can look at dynamics of population. We can create life tables, and we can study life history of those species, right? Okay, so just a little recap. Now, population size fluctuates as new individuals are born, immigrate or emigrate away or die, right? So the population size depends on natality, how many are born, mortality, how many dies, immigration, how many enter, and emigration, how many leave, right? So that's how you know, population fluctuates based on all these factors. So of course we can use a mathematical formula to calculate the population growth rate. So if R is a growth rate, then growth rate equals how many are born minus how many died, right? And a population size multiplied by this growth rate give us population growth. And this population growth, it can be positive, negative, or it can be zero. So if this is, if this number is positive, then population is growing. If this number is negative, population is decreasing in size. And if it equals zero, then population is stable, it's not changing, right? It's not growing and it's not getting smaller. Now, how do those population grow? We have two types of population growth, exponential, and here next one is logistic. So exponential and logistic. So let's look at exponential population growth. That's a graph that represented. So we can see the population size on the y-axis and time in months in the x-axis. And you see like population is really skyrocketing over here, like really growing crazy. And this is what exponential population growth is. And why would population grow that much when we have perfect conditions, right? Those are called ideal unlimited resources. So if you have as much food as they need, as much space and water and shelter and not that many predators, right, then population will grow up. Right, so exponential growth explain how a few dozen rabbits can multiply into millions, right? And in a certain circumstances following disasters, organisms show this you know, exponential population growth, especially the ones that have opportunistic life history, right? So actually all the population would grow like this. If, you know, if we have enough resources, any population will show this exponential growth. But can it be like this forever? Obviously not. Population cannot grow constantly. It will be some limitation. And what limit the population growth is population limiting factors, right? So we do have limiting factors. Those are environmental factors that hold population growth in check and restrict the number of individuals that can occupy a habitat. So carrying capacity is the maximum population size that a particular environment can sustain, right? So over here, we don't know what population is that, but again, any population will, you know, will reach its carrying capacity. So you see over here that population grow exponentially first. So it goes right really rapidly, And then when it reaches the carrying capacity, it actually overshoot a little bit, but then it's decline in size, goes back up. So it's a fluctuate itself at the point of this carrying capacity. So it goes a little bit over, a little bit below, but it stays stable. And this is our case selected species. And that's logistic population growth. So logistic population growth occurs when the growth rate decreases as the population size approaches carrying capacity, right? So here's exponentially, and then we reaching this plateau, right? Because, right, we fluctuate a little bit, go up and down, but not too much above the carrying capacity. Now, what are those factors that limit size of the population? There's actually two groups of factors, density-dependent factors and density-independent factors. So density-dependent factors in which the, how big the population is, the density of the population affect the growth rate and mortality. And density-independent factors causes mortality in the population regardless of population density. So pretty much when the population getting too big and they start competing for, resources, that will be density dependent factors. But population can be big or small, doesn't matter. If they still start dying, right, then it will be density independent factors. Population size increases when competition becomes more intense, and birth rates decline. So here you can see two graphs, and first shows us the number of breeding pairs in a population of great tits. Right, so that's a little bird over here. And when we see that more and more breeding pairs we have, what happened with the average clutch size? It's decreasing. And clutch is how many eggs do they lay. So if you have only 10 breeding pairs, we have about 11 eggs, right, in one clutch. But when we have, let's say, 90 breeding pairs, we only have less than 8 eggs in each clutch, right? So that's how density affect the size of the population. And over here, we see that when those are beetles, flower beetles, and when we see we have more and more beetles, right, more density in 0.5 grams of flour, they start dying. So survivorship decreases. Right? So that means we cannot have millions of these beetles in a 0.5 gram of flour. They will not have enough place to live and enough food to survive, right? That all makes sense. So density dependent factors may include accumulation of toxic waste, limited food supply, limited territory. But we do have density independent factors. And density, when you're looking at density independent factor, you see this sudden decline in the population size, right? So here's the number of aphids that goes up, say growing exponentially, right? What we expect? We expect them to reach their carrying capacity, right? And just fluctuate around it. But here you see sudden decline. That means something happened. Maybe fire, maybe flood, maybe some freeze, right? But they died unexpectedly without even reaching the maximum size of the population, right? So population limiting factors whose intensity is unrelated to population density include fire, flood, storm, volcanic eruption, decrease in temperature. Population also shows what we call population cycles. So some populations have regular boom and bust cycles, and it's characterized by period of rapid exponential growth followed by steep decline. So well-studied cycles are life cycles of snowshoe hares and their predator lynx. So if you see blue here shows us snowshoe hare, and the population goes up, and then declines. And before it declines, the population of lynx increases, right? Lots of food, so population of lynx increases. But when the snowshoe hare population size decreases, then lynx start dying as well, right? So that's very very good representation of boom and bust cycles. The cause of these cycles may include winter food shortage for the hare, over exploitation of hares by lynx and other predators, and combination of both. So that's not direct relationship between just hare and lynx. It's a lot of factors also involved. Okay, so good. So now why do we need to know it? Why do we need to study population ecology? So population ecology is used to increase population of organisms we wish to harvest, decrease population of pests, and save population of organisms threatened with extinction, right? So if we know how population grow, if we can predict changes within the population, then we can either try to harvest them, or we try to decrease the size. Okay, so in US Endangered Species Act, endangered and threatened species are defined, right? Endangered species are one that is in danger of extinction throughout all or a significant portion of its range. And threatened species, one that is likely to become endangered in a foreseeable future. So a major factor in population decline is habitat destruction and habitat modification. So according to the logistic growth model that we just described, the fastest growth rate occurs when the population size is at roughly half of the carrying capacity. So when population growing exponentially, right, and then it's reaching its carrying capacity, at what point population is growing the faster? And here, right in the middle, right before it reaches the carrying capacity, this is a point of maximal growth. And what does it mean? It means theoretically that population should be harvested down to this level, but not below, right? So if we harvest population up to this level, this population have chances to recover. If we harvest it below this point, that might affect population and really decrease it in size. So here's the example of the Northern Atlantic cod fishery. So you can see that we had like thousands of metric tons of fish, and it was not estimated correctly. And what happened that we harvested it so much, right, that it pretty much disappeared, right? So it was so high mortality rate that the fishery collapsed in 1992 and has not recovered since that. So that's what happened when I go back over here, when they were harvested way below this point of maximum growth. Okay, invasive species. So invasive species are non-native species that has spread far beyond the original point of introduction and causes environmental and economic damage by colonizing and dominating suitable habitats. So some species that does not belong to the territory where they are spreading right now. Cheatgrass would be one example. Cheatgrass is invasive species and they produce seeds earlier and in a greater abandon the native species and form highly flammable brush, creating fires that native plants cannot tolerate. So invasive species may benefit from the absence of pathogens, predators, herbivores, and we can use biological control to to keep the size of the population in some limits, right, to control the size of a population. And biological control include releasing of natural enemy to attack pest population. And it's used to manage invasive species. So here was the example. What was introduced to Hawaiian Islands was a rat population. So rat population are invasive species, and scientists decided to introduce their predator over there, mongoose. So mongoose was introduced to control rat population, but mongoose, they soon became invasive species themselves. And they not only feeding on rat, they eat anything that is available. So they start hunting and eating amphibians, reptiles, birds, domestic poultry. So that's the example when biological control didn't work very well. And again, why are we talking about this biological control? Because we want to control, over here, I go back, because we want to control is this here? Yeah, we want to control the population of pests, or population of maybe decrease the population of some plants or animals, right? So if you want to control the population of rat, we're trying to use this mongoose that didn't work very well. So now when we're talking about pests, they are also like invasive species. They have opportunistic life history and can cause extensive crop damage. So let me pick up my pointer again. So how to control the size of the pest population under control? Well, we can use pesticides. So pesticides are poisons that kill them, right? It's result in you kill the pest, but there is always lots of side effects and other stuff that's happening. But first of all, we start seeing more and more pesticide resistant pests, right? Because that's evolution that happened right in front of our eyes. Plus, pesticides kill natural predators of the pest. Pesticides can also kill pollinators. So just uncontrolled use of pesticides, not good way of management. Then what we can use? We can use what is called IPM. It is integrated pest management. And what IPM does, it tolerates a low level of pests instead of total eradication. And it produces a sustainable control of agriculture pests. So, and what IPM means, that we can combine different methods. We can use chemical methods like pesticides, right? But not just pure pesticides. We can also use biological method, right? Maybe introduce their predators, or we can use cultural method. And that means we can change the type of crop that we're growing, right, to deplete the pests from their reliable source of food. Because if you constantly, planting the same crop, like corn this year, next year, like it's corn, and corn, then you attract more and more, insects that feed on this corn. But if you use cultural method, you use different type of crop, then it's harder for those pests to be adapted, right? So this is IPM that combines all these methods. So IPM methods include using pest-resistant varieties of crops. So we can have crop that is pest-resistant. We can use mixed species planting, and we can rotate crop to deprive the pest of a dependable food source, right? So here you can see IPM that include monitoring, biological agent, chemical control, and cultural practice and preventable measures, right? And all this allow us to get a pretty good amount of crop, right? And at the same time, do not create more and more resistant pests, do not kill pollinators, do not kill other plants and animals that are very valuable to our environment. So let me see, I think that's the last slide. Okay, so that's it for population ecology. And thank you for watching, and I hope it was helpful.